it takes hope, purpose, mission. It takes that new perspective in life to let people be released from the things that are holding them in bondage. And so often they don't even know that they're being held in bondage by very real life events. Like, I don't want to downplay ever the trauma. The trauma's real and it's legit. But what we do with it, there's a lot of choice. There's a lot of freedom in what we do with it.
The Jim Gale Show is live. We're so excited to have you back with us. We have an incredible guest with us today, Matt Guedes from Camp Freedom, where he is working with retired veterans and retired first responders and really helping them get back with purpose, aligned with new mission, and getting back up and on their feet. Jim, as always, so great to have you with me on the show. And Matt, welcome to the Jim Gale Show. Why don't you let our guests know a little bit about you, and we'll get this kicked off.
Yeah, first and foremost, thank you for letting me join. I really appreciate the opportunity, Jim and Matt, for letting me come on here and share a little bit about what we do at Camp Freedom, and hopefully be able to build a synergy between what you're doing and what we're doing, and figure out some ways to work together. But Camp Freedom is an incredible property, and more than that, an incredible mission. We have 2,300 acres in Northeast Pennsylvania where we do outdoor adventures for disabled veterans, disabled first responders, their family members, and Gold Star families. And everything we do for them is all free of charge. So we hike and we bike and we walk and we fish and we hunt and we shoot and we identify birds and trees and mushrooms and anything else that we can do in the outdoors. We cross-country ski and we snowshoe. And literally, if it can be outdoors, we do it and do it with purpose.
That's fantastic, buddy. Wow. Well, we've known each other, and I've known about your work for some time now, and I've seen the pictures that you post. I mean, some of your hunting excursions are absolutely fantastic. And, you know, we had a conversation, about 2 weeks ago, and then we had poor internet, so we're redoing this show. But a couple of weeks ago, I remember having chills so much of the time of the different interactions that you're experiencing with these veterans who, many of whom are suffering so greatly. And so I'd like to go into that a little bit. And then on the other side of that, we can talk about your solutions and the solutions that we can bring forward to all of our audience and all of the world.
Yeah, you know, you're right on the money, Jim, by saying there's so many men and women, true American heroes, I like to call them, because in America, we're a little confused about heroism and who a hero is and who a hero may not be. We're a little confused. And so these men and women have served our country in varying capacities in honorable ways, whether it's in the military, whether it's as law enforcement, whether it's as an EMS, EMT, whether it's, as a fireman or firewoman. They have served honorably. And in that service, they have faced either a single traumatic event in their life, a traumatic occurrence, or in many cases, like with our first responders, it's that cumulative buildup of trauma day after day after day after day. You don't run into a burning building and forget what happened, forget what you see, forget what occurred. You don't come upon a car accident and be able to dismiss the horrific scene that you've walked upon and that you've seen and experienced. You don't get blown up by an IED and forget that occurrence. Those things, our minds are the greatest recorders ever created. And those things get embedded in our mind. And if not handled correctly, if not dealt with correctly, those traumatic experiences can often lead to chain of events that create really, really bad scenarios in many lives. And we get the privilege of serving these true American heroes and serving them with a very simple philosophy. We have peer-to-peer interaction, and that's them with each other, them with our staff, who's all either veterans, first responders, or family members of. And then we turn it into camaraderie, that deeper love and care for one another that many miss when they get out of the military or when they get out of law enforcement. And we combine it around an outdoor adventure. And in the beginning, I actually thought the outdoor adventure was the whole key to the whole thing. But it's really the relationships that come with the outdoor adventure that make this whole thing click.
Wow. It's just beautiful. And when you're talking about the emotions, the PTSD, right, the post-traumatic stress disorder, there's many books written about this. The first was called Molecules of Emotion by Candace Pert, where she was an MIT gal, and she went in and she studied how emotions interact with the tissues of our body. And an emotion based on one of these traumatic events that is not fully absorbed and fully transacted. In other words, an emotion that's stuck in your body will create dis-ease, which will turn into a disease, right? So it's so fascinating that what you're talking about is you can follow the path of these emotions. And so then to open up a light into those areas where people can kind of release that is so important. And a lot of your work with the community, with the relationships helps that happen.
You know, if people would stop going down the process of suicidal ideology because of drugs or because of some procedure or some training that they've gone through, the issue would have been eradicated a long time ago. I believe the key to keeping our individuals, again, these true American heroes who've fallen upon tough times through traumatic experiences in their life, the key to keep them from going down that path of suicide is often relationally based. It really is. You know, it may not be enough to not want to take one's own life because of the pharmaceuticals that they've been put on, or because of the program that they're a part of, or because of, you know, this training that they've gone to. But relationships are really the key to seeing those suicide numbers drop. You know, we've all heard 22 suicides a day in our military, you know, aspects of life in our veterans' lives. And the reality is that number was never 22. It's always been greatly higher. It's 22 within the very limited confines of how the VA defines suicide. And so, you know, there's other occurrences of suicide that take place where people die by suicide, and it doesn't fit the definition that the VA provided, and therefore that number's not counted. But it's always been way more than that. But during this last 2 years of forced isolation, those numbers have skyrocketed. Even by their own definitions, we've seen 64, 68, 67 average per day going on.
Gosh.
And so one suicide is too many.
Yes. Yes.
And we've seen these horrific numbers. And then among first responders, it has skyrocketed, you know, with all of the lunacy, frankly, that has gone on in our country and how we've handled first responders and in particularly law enforcement.
Let's go into the lunacy. I'd like to dive into this. And this is my perspective. This is not Matt Guedes' perspective. I just want to share that. Now, you might agree with me or not, but the lunacy, how many of those veterans, of veterans in general, pass away of drug overdose and addiction, right? And because that's another type of suicide. Right? You are so stressed about life and about looking at the world clearly that you take a chemical that will kill you and has killed many, many millions of people. And it all comes from the same general entities, the same entities that are governing our world. And so this is a question that I ask all veterans is, who are you following at the moment? And that's why there's a lot of stress, because people are not trusting and believing in the system that they serve. They want to serve humanity. They want to serve our nation, our incredible group of people that live here in America. But yet when they start looking at what they're serving, sometimes they're going, wait a minute, that didn't make sense, right?
Yeah, and you know, for a lot of reasons, the VA often their first answer, and I'm not a completely 100% negative VA guy. Actually, the service I have been given has been excellent. But here is what I will say. Because of limited care, because of limited staffing, because of limited funding, because of the incredible machine that pharmaceuticals have become and the way they push their agenda and their financial gain into all these different arenas, often the first answer to those struggling with PTSD, and I want to come back to that, even that nomenclature in a minute, but those that are struggling with the effects of trauma, let's call it, the answer often is pharmaceuticals, and it becomes the start point. And that start point of opioids, which is often the answer, just starts a train wreck in life. And the dependence upon opioids, and then 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8. Next thing you know, you can't get your prescription. Now it turns to heroin. And all of this just takes place. And we are living out the results of pharmaceutical companies having such massive control over our culture because of the realities of money. You follow the money, you find where things really are. And the reality is we have a ton of vets and first responders who get hooked on opioids and who are dying literally as a result of that progression, and how it started out and how they got to that point. But often it starts because they don't have time, because of many reasons, to get to the heart of the matter. So you deal with the fruit on the end of the tree, and a drug seems to be able to dull that individual's senses and sensibility so that they think they're helping, but there's really no help in that. If we don't deal with the root causes and issues of any matter, whatever that is, we're not helping. PTSD, I want to come back to that. I had this very wise woman. Her name's Jeannie Rosencrantz. She's a trauma specialist in Lackawanna County here in Pennsylvania. She's been in this arena, in the first responder arena, in the area of care and trauma care for over 30 years. And she likes to refer to it as PTSI. And she substitutes injury instead of disorder. And this is one of the things that makes so much sense to me. Disorder brings this concept of permanence, of finality. And, when you do a brain scan, and I've seen them, on an individual with truly post-traumatic stress disorder, a TBI-created post-traumatic, or even a non-TBI-created traumatic post-stress disorder, there's an actual physical injury that you can see through that brain scan. And injuries heal. Disorders, again, bring along this concept of permanence. So I have tried to adopt the concept of injury being the substituted word instead of disorder, because you know what? I've watched people's lives be rescued and saved over and over and over again. And guess what? Their trauma hasn't changed. It's no different. They have changed. They have learned to become overcomers in their scenario, not remove themselves from their scenario, but become individuals who have overcome the circumstances of their trauma. And I've watched healing take place. So that was one of the wisest things that anybody has ever spoken into my life in this arena. And I love it. The problem is when you're talking to people, when you're talking to these great listeners of yours, we've all become adept to the terminology of post-traumatic stress disorder. And if we don't call it that, people don't even know what we're talking about.
We will change that.
We'll change it. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. And you know what that does for the people who have that injury is
hope.
Reframes it for them and gives them hope.
Yeah. It takes hope, purpose, mission.
Yeah.
It takes that new perspective in life to let people be released from the things that are holding them in bondage. And so often they don't even know that they're being held in bondage by very real life events. Like, I don't want to downplay ever the trauma. The trauma's real and it's legit. But what we do with it, there's a lot of choice. There's a lot of freedom in what we do with it. And so we try and teach our men and women that come through Camp Freedom. We try and teach victory. We try and teach overcoming. We try and teach freedom. And we do it with hope and mission and purpose and love and all of those great things that we need so much of in our very broken America right now.
That is absolutely beautiful. Matthew, I got an idea that I want to share before you chat. Let's title the name of this Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder, and let's cross out the word disorder and put injury in capital letters. And then this just popped into my head, because that reframe is absolutely critical. It's an injury that with your help, they can overcome. And Matthew, I want to get to hear your opinion. I also want to say this idea that popped into my head is today, we are speaking to you. If you are a veteran out there who's suffering, this is for you. We have solutions for the pain that you're in. So Matthew, go ahead.
One thing that really popped out to me as we talk about the pharmaceutical intervention is the relation that pharmaceuticals have to war and the history of war, and how a lot of the chemicals used in some wars now have become drugs and stuff that's utilized to destroy nature in other ways, right? We look at our food supply, tying this back together. One of our most commonly used chemicals was literally designed to kill people during war. That's glyphosate, right? And it's now covering 80+%, I believe, or even higher of our food production. And then we look at some of the other things that were utilized, even down to the fertilizers, which were, again, also utilized in war. So we've got these things that have both now were originally used to kill and maim and cause problems to the enemy, now are being used to supposedly grow food and treat people to help them become better. What I take from that is they've just found a way to repurpose something. They're still killing people. So ultimately they're still being used for war and ultimately to make money.
That's such a key point in all of this, is that, again, I hate to be a skeptic on so many things, but the reality is that when you follow the dollars, you find the real reasons behind so much of what goes on in our culture. This is now coming on the tail end of just a couple days ago, and I don't want to get too political, but of a raid on an ex-president's house, regardless of what anybody thinks or doesn't think of President Trump. Regardless, let's just remove the like or dislike of that. The fact that we are in a country where now the rule of law can be removed and people can essentially, because of dislike or because of political viewpoints, raid someone's home. I mean, and look, that didn't happen without approval of a court. That didn't happen without the executive branch knowing. Let me just tell you that. Yeah, and so we're living in these crazy, almost fascist type of times. And again, I think the dislike, this is just my opinion, not Matt, executive director of Camp Freedom. This is Matt Guedes, the individual, because I'm not political as a nonprofit executive director. But in my opinion, the one thing that President Trump did that has Republicans and Democrats so upset is he exposed the way that money is made on the backdoor end and the way that politics has been used to generate wealth for so many people for so long. And he just exposed it all. And they hate him because of that, frankly. So again, regardless of where people fall, you just got to think about, how do we get to this point where the government machine has really unadulterated power to do whatever they want, to where now you look at some of these bills and stuff that are getting passed, all these new IRS agents, if you read the description in that, it is literally stated that they have the ability to carry a firearm and to make arrests.
And kill people, use deadly force.
Yes.
It says in the thing, use deadly force.
I mean, but anyway, I got us way off track. We were talking food and chemicals and drugs. And
I found it
so
ironic that Nancy Pelosi comes on the screen and says, nobody is above the law.
I've got to rant for a sec. So we are at war. This is absolutely the third world war. Some people say it's the fourth. Well, then I had a long party, 10 years. I don't remember the third, but it's never not been war in a way, right? There's always been factions that lead themselves to government. The lobbyists for Big Pharma, I've heard, are 3 times the budget as the second biggest lobbyists. Kennedy said that the number one thing to watch out for is the military-industrial complex. When these entities get together and combine their energies in a way that forces people to do any freaking thing, mandates of any kind, our system is based in force and violence, and it all comes from the head of the snake. People don't realize that it's not the people who are destroying our world. It's the policies that are destroying our world. and they all go to the head of the snake. And I'm going to just be super clear on this. If BlackRock, which is an entity that did $21 trillion last year, right? If they spent that money ethically, if they invested their energy, and by the way, BlackRock is run by a computer named Aladdin. You can look this up. It's all public knowledge. And if they were ethical and spent 5% of their worth, right? Which, by the way, how did they get that worth? By betting the market, by sucking the energy. So the market is based on human productivity, right? And they found a way to use a computer to bet and suck out the energy of humanity to the tune of $21 trillion last year. If they put 5% of that in, we could have $1 million gardens, food forest education sites around the world. With fewer than 10,000 cities in the world, that's more than 100 new nurseries for the common good, for the true common good, right? That whole term has been socialized and used for communism. The common good is not about violence and force. It's about voluntarism. So that one thing would change the world. Of course, BlackRock runs all the major corporations in our world, including the government.
Yeah, it's them, Vanguard, and then State Street's the other one. Really, those three are the largest that control pretty much every public company and are heavily involved in the public-private partnerships, right? Then you got the Gates Foundation, Clinton Foundation, Open Society, or whatever George Soros is called, and them commingling with WEF and WHO. And, it's really how we're getting to this wonderful place we're at today, where being at war means we can come out as winners. And I think we're all knowing that every day, more and more people tune in to shows like ours, the shows that are speaking more truth, hearing about these things. I think the internet has gotten away from the controllers or the wannabes, and it's allowing the truth to really come to light. And it's so great that we get to be in this time leading this transition. And Matt, with what you're doing, helping these people who have already decided early in their life, most of the time, that they wanted to give their lives in service of humanity, of freedom, of caring for others, being protectors, and being willing to lay their life on the line in order to make that a reality. This is a chance, in my opinion, for them to really find a new mission and passion, redirect some of that energy, and really create this new world that we see as possible while reclaiming their own life in that way.
And that's great, because when you think about the individual, all of us, the way we're made up, we really do need a holistic approach to healing. We really do need a holistic approach. Like when I look at, all of us have tendencies to think this, whatever our this is the answer. And what I've found is, because we're so uniquely made and created, we're all such individuals, with different makeups, different past, different history, different trauma, different experiences, all of that we often think there's a one size fits all. And it just doesn't work. So what we're finding with our men and women, who many of whom are wounded by trauma because of war, literal war, the war machine, we've watched it for the last 20 plus years. And then we watch situations where, you have the withdrawal, the horrific withdrawal from Afghanistan. I liked that we were leaving. It was time, a long time ago. However, how we did it has now taken that entire population of vets who served in Afghanistan and has led them to ask the same question that I hear from my Vietnam vets all the time is, why in the world did we risk our life? Why in the world did my friend lose his life? Why did I lose my limb? Why? Because it was so handled so poorly in the aftermath that it makes the question of, why did we even do any of that? And now when that question starts being asked of like our modern day Afghanistan vets, it becomes very dangerous. Because when they start questioning the significance of their contribution and of what they signed a dotted line to go do, it places them in a dangerous place of instability. And with instability coming out of past trauma, suicide becomes a reality in those scenarios. And so, all of this ties together. And what we have found, again, is if we can find hope and purpose and mission built around anything that is whole and pure and good. And we can give an everyday reason to wake up, an everyday reason to live, an everyday relationship to invest in, an everyday event to participate in. We watch that healing take place. And we've teamed with all kinds of aspects. We do everything in nature, and I think that's massively huge. But like we team up, there's a company down in the Lehigh Valley called New House, NU House. And I've sent 5 veterans there with serious TBIs. And they've gone there and they've gone for cold laser light therapy, combined with acupuncture, combined with massage, combined with all of these different aspects, cryotherapy, and I've watched these men, it was all men in these 5, I've watched them come back completely different people. And you know, so it's not this one size fits all. It's how do we restore the mix of getting our minds right, getting our hearts right, getting our physical bodies right through proper nutrition and care and food, which is, you guys are in the middle of that. You know, how do we combine all of this and in the midst of it, let our men and women reclaim true freedom in life? Because people aren't free, man. We're slaves. We just don't recognize what we're slaves to.
I want to say this one quote because I just want to back up what you just said. Goethe, none are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free. My friends, we have been slaves, and now we are waking up. This is the apocalypse, which simply means the great unveiling or the lifting of the veil. So embrace it and become inspired again, right? Look to serve, but from a way that is benefiting you and everybody else.
Yeah, it's just, this is exciting. You know, I look for every means possible to try and put different avenues in front of our heroes, our men and women, because what works for you might not work for me. What works for me might not work for somebody else. However, there are components that work for everybody. And those are the things that I try and find. You know, a healthy diet is going to help everybody. I don't care who you are, what your background is. You know, when we're eating right, caring for our bodies right, taking care of ourselves right, that's going to have a positive impact in varying degrees for individuals. You know, when we're working hard, you know, particularly as men, you know, we're designed to work hard. Now, I think that's got really tweaked in a bad way. You know, the concept of you got to work 40 hours a week and be a slave to a company in order to feed your passions and your desires and to be able to afford the things that you think you need and want and desire. We become a part of that whole machine, you know, and I don't think that that's freedom at all. However, I will state people have the freedom to choose if they want to do that. But when you start recognizing true freedom, taking care of yourself and serving others first, which to me is the core of all freedom. It's not about what do I get? How do I benefit? What do I become? It's about how do I serve others? And in that, I experienced this great freedom that I don't know outside of service. So I don't know, I'm rambling. I'm sorry, guys. I'm all over the
beautiful.
map today.
I love to shine a light on the Nash equilibrium here. So a bunch of years back, about 200 years ago, this guy, Adam Smith, founded the modern economic theory of the day. And his economic theory lasted for about 150 years. And it was this, and this is very relevant to what we're talking about. If every person in an economy does what's best for themselves, then you will have a strong economy. Right? Now, about 50 years ago, John Nash, who was a math guy and who was trying to win a Nobel Prize by coming up with a theory that would change the world, he came up with one of the most profound and simple theories ever in the economic world we live in. Do what's best for you and others. He added those 2 words, which speak to the ethics of the exchange of value, the voluntary exchange of value. When we get to the core root of the ethics of why we are serving, because it's darn good for me, because I get so much value out of serving in an ethical world. So I just want to share that. And by the way, Hollywood made a film about John Nash. It's called A Beautiful Mind. I think Russell Crowe won the Oscar in that show. And John Nash won the Nobel Peace Prize. But here's what Hollywood did. They made John Nash into a schizophrenic and a crazy person throughout the show. So instead of focusing Hollywood's $100 million budget or whatever it was on the beauty of the idea that would really revolutionize society and change the world, they made him out to be a schizophrenic, and that was the end of the show.
Yeah, there's something very powerful I always thought around. It's one of the easiest ways to be depressed is to focus on yourself and your own problems and things that are going on in your life. And one of the fastest ways to turn that around and get really happy is to focus on helping everybody else with theirs. Right. And you take it off of you and apply it to serving and contributing to the lives of other people and helping them reach for their best and get out of whatever challenges they're currently facing. And when just that simple switch in your focus makes a monstrous difference in how you feel. And I always felt that when I was doing the personal training and I dealt with a lot of people who would come in depressed because of how they looked and felt and that kind of stuff. And when I got them to shift their mind towards helping other people, how quickly that changed for them.
There's always a healthy, and in my space, a healthy and biblical concept of self-love, and the scriptures address the reality that, if you don't know how to love yourself, you're not going to love others effectively, paraphrasing. However, I look at how America takes concepts, twists them just a fraction of a degree and gives it new meaning. So back in the day when we grew up, well, at least when I grew up, I'm a little older than you guys. When I grew up, the whole concept was self-esteem, 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 self-esteem. And we created an atmosphere where the whole world revolved around you as an individual, which was not a healthy self-love. But it created really this self-adoration that was way out of balance, that became all about me, that became selfish in intent, and it took away others first. And then we wonder, fast forwarding now, when people in my generation and those below us, that we have such a selfish culture. And I believe that entire self-esteem movement was instrumental, where now it's funny because even some of the main psychologists, psychiatrists that were advocates of that have come back out and said, boy, we made a train wreck of culture, didn't we? By telling people, because here's the reality. We all want to take care of ourselves generally. I get where that gets twisted, turned, but we know that there's an aspect of self-care that is healthy and balanced and good. But when you add the end to others, it really brings things to light. And the greatest values that I have found in my life is the ability, are the times rather when I'm serving others. I've always been in roles of leadership, back to sports and athletics, and then in the military as an officer, and then running businesses and doing the things that I've done. But when I've been effective is when I've understood a healthy perspective about who I am, understanding strengths and weaknesses, and then understanding how to serve others. And when that was all combined and right, you lead effectively. When that's not right and out of balance in any area, you lead in an ill-effective way, and you see a lot of negativity come in your life. So when you're talking about depression and those things that are so commonplace today, and we just hit it with a dose of drugs, it doesn't change anything. It doesn't change. All it does is it makes us high to not deal with the reality of the situation. It doesn't fix anything.
Exactly.
No.
It masks the symptoms of the injury, not the cause.
And then we talk about these doses of drugs. Think of what they're doing to the children now. How many children are given Ritalin and name your psychoactive pharmaceutical drug that are given to kids these days when they enter our so-called education system, right? The weapons of mass instruction that we call our education system. And now these children who are, right, that education system, talks to people in a auditory digital way, which that's only one of the learning styles, right? So we're leaving out all of these other learning styles that children utilize. And we're teaching them things that are oftentimes irrelevant really to life as a whole. What we're teaching them instead is programming to condition them to essentially fit well into the matrix as slaves and not ask questions, not do group work, not think independently, trust the experts, fall in line, blah, 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 right? But as now it's become even more apparent how those drugs are being effective at dumbing us down even further while making money for these organizations that, in my opinion, are operating very nefariously and is now creating this whole society of children who are even further numb to their feelings, the world around them, etc. And it's creating this, I think it's put us in this mess. We're here because of how the education system and the drug system has impacted us, from a chemical standpoint with the drugs, right? Messing up our endocrine system, our hormones, all that stuff. Now we have 138 genders, and it's just this mess. And
we only have two, buddy.
It's because of chemicals. I think we're in this gender problem because of chemicals that are in our food, that are in our soaps, that are in our hair care products and our creams, and the list goes on, and the drugs. And we've just created this massive mess, and we have a solution to it, really.
Us. Yes, it's been created and coerced upon us.
Yeah.
And to be awake to that is the foundation of the next level of freedom.
Yes.
And you guys know that that's a heartbeat issue for me. I mean, last time when we were filming, when it didn't take because of the internet, I threw out there my book to your listeners because I think it's relevant. Yes. I wrote a book recently called The Sissification of America's Young Men. And the whole premise of the book, Matthew, is so much of what you just talked about. It's that component that our culture and some of the lead philosophies, people, individuals, companies, organizations, who financially benefit from these areas of life have programmed our entire culture to redefine manhood and masculinity, to redefine how we are to live and how we were designed to live. And a lot of it's through our education system. And I look at just from 1960 forward in the book and look at the way the NEA and the women's liberation movement and all of these things intentionally attacked and tried to redefine manhood and masculinity, because when you get that broken, the rest of culture will break. And it is broken. And so, for your listeners, if you're at all interested, and if you're not, that's fine too. But if you're at all interested, you can go get the book, The Sissification of America's Young Men, book that I recently wrote. It's available on all the outlets out there, wherever you want to go, Barnes and Noble.
We'll make sure it's in the show notes so people can find it and purchase it for sure.
But it's a reprogramming that has taken place. And all of the reprogramming, in my opinion, is built on money again. It's built on personal benefit to the elite and an agenda to rob the populace of freedom. And it has worked incredibly well.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
And my recommendation for all the listeners too, if you want to get a better insight into all this, the book Weapons of Mass Instruction, and the other one that this gentleman has written is Dumbing Us Down. This is a 30+ year teacher who really took diligent notes of all the things that was going on through his experience as a teacher. And then at the same time, really began researching the history of the modern education system in America, which now has spread its tentacles out into many different countries around the world. But all this standardized stuff that was put into place through the education system, the revealing of the history of it is mind-boggling on who was involved. Interestingly enough, many of the same players' names we hear today, and how they took that and weaponized it really to use against us to ensure that we would conform and fall in line and continually just succumb to what we're being told.
Because we talked last time, another thing that's key to me in this is I love what you guys are doing. So we've talked about camp and we've talked about all these other things, but I love what you guys are doing. And we really need to figure out how we take that component and use the ground, the 2,300 acres we have at Camp Freedom, and we're going to keep expanding. We're not, we got to figure out how to take the food component and health and all the things that we're talking about and implement that back into to create an atmosphere and an opportunity for our men and women, our heroes, to become healthier than they currently are.
This is so much fun because we've got it. We've got the whole thing. It's called the Freedom Farm Academy. The Freedom Farm Academy will demonstrate off-grid luxury, a luxurious lifestyle. Yes, it might be in a tiny home, or it could be in a mansion. It doesn't matter. It could be whatever your funds will allow. But around this, we're going to use a tiny container home as our model. And around this tiny container home, first of all, on the roof of it are all the solar panels that it needs to power the home, and maybe a little bit of solar in the back covering some of the greenhouse, because you'll need a few more panels than will fit on the roof of one of these homes, right? Then it's got a little greenhouse. It's got water catchment where you've got your water and your food and your energy all around you to be 100% off the grid and not just survive, but absolutely thrive. And once these systems are in place, the profit model that all of the veterans listening to live in one of these systems, and then the profit models are absolutely incredible. And what are they? I'll give you a couple of them. The owner of that Freedom Farm Academy will educate people and also design freedom into their yards and their lifestyles, and then help them install the freedom, which in the way of food forestry is one of my favorite things. So in other words, we'll turn half of a community's lawn or an individual family's lawn into a food forest, an edible landscape that with a quarter acre of lawn can actually provide most of the food the family needs to thrive. And in a way that's not annual production, right? It can have annuals, but the perennial food forest, which are fruit trees and berry bushes and grapevines and all of the different plants that grow for generations with very little maintenance. When you stack all of those into a yard, you've got the ultimate freedom, in my opinion.
Well, and what's so exciting to me about this, Jim, and this concept is 85% of our veterans never use their post 9/11 GI Bill. And they don't use it because when they get out of the military at 26, 27, 28, 29, 30 years old, 40 years old, 42 years old, the last thing they want to do is go back into a traditional education system. It's just not on their radar. So they have all this money that they've earned that goes unused or gets passed on to their children and then goes unused often. But the reality is that we are working with Keystone College locally. And in April of this next year, in all likeliness, we will become certified to be able to run 2-week certification courses where we're using that to do courses like Hunt Guiding 101 and 201, Fly Fishing Guide 101 and 201, gunsmithing and Boyer School and videography and photography in the outdoor, things that will be attractive and can lead to a livelihood. But in addition to that, if we have the credentials, we can do any 2-week courses and we can stack 4 of them together or 8 of them together or 10 of them together. And we can teach this concept, which provides freedom, for those that may want to go down the pathway of being off the grid, providing for themselves, finding that kind of freedom that they want in their life, or help them to care for others through learning this system and providing for others. So, we got to figure this out and figure out how to tie this all together. One thing that we will do is we will have the vehicle in place for the credentialed education piece so that they can use their money. That's so cool. Then they can choose how they use it. But this has to be an offering, in my opinion, that we're going to do is to figure out how to tie this in.
It's such perfect alignment in every way to teach people how to be free and how to grow food in the midst of a food supply chain disaster is a pretty good business to be in.
Yes.
Do you guys see the Freedom Farm Academy up now?
Yes, I do now.
Okay, great.
And there's been more disasters just this week in this realm. And it's a joke. I mean, it's an absolute joke about what's going on. And it's not a joke.
It's
because
criminal.
Lives are being ruined and food is being intentionally sabotaged.
It's war.
Yeah, it is war. You're right.
So I just brought this up, Jim, since you started talking about it. Do you want to just chat a little bit about this one page here so people can kind of get a concept of what the Freedom Farm Academy is all about? I
would love to. What do you think, Matt?
Go.
All right. So imagine this is currently based on a half acre. So it could be a half acre or more. And in this system, you've got your living quarters. Now, this could be, like I said, a tiny home or this type of home here. You've got your greenhouse. Number 1 there with the different color squares, that's where the community can bring their mulch and their soil and their compost. And then what our Freedom Farm Academy people will do, that is such an incredible asset that most of the time gets taken to a dumpster somewhere or a landfill. We will take those assets, even plastic jugs. If you've got a gallon plastic orange juice jug or milk jug or whatever, or a glass bottle, bring it to us at the Freedom Farm Academy and we'll fill it up with compost tea or whatever. We can even fill those up with soil, the right kind of things. So we become a community hub for barter and trade of all of the things that are needed to turn the whole community into a food self-reliant community. Then you've got the food forest demonstration site, which blows people's minds. Here at Gulf's Landing, when somebody comes and sees our food forest, we've got one that we put in 18 months ago, one that we put in 12 months ago, and one that we put in 6 months ago. And it's like walking through time. By the time you get to the 18-month food forest, you've got dozens of large, good-sized trees and hundreds of pounds of food already sitting there, either in the ground or we've already eaten it. And that's with zero maintenance. I'd say in a 1.5 year period, we did take out a bunch of the weeds one time. And by the way, I've got to say there's no such thing as a weed in nature, but some of the competitive plants, that took about 10 hours over an 18-month period. That's the only maintenance we've done. So this system provides all these different levels of potential profits. You can see 1 through 17 on the right. And it also provides joy and education for kids. You can bring churches in or schools in, and you could take them through the food forest, and it will be the most memorable experience some of these kids have had in a long time, especially if they're inner city kids or if they're kids in opportunity zones. Because a lot of kids in these areas don't realize how easy it is to grow food. They don't even know where their food comes from, quite frankly.
Like ultimately, what we want to do with these Freedom Farm Academies is show the world everything that's possible when we work in harmony with nature and utilize our resources properly, instead of doing so in our current consumer-driven model of consumption, right? We're trying to build out closed loop systems that feed themselves and continue to propagate new plants, continue to improve quality of soil health, continue to capture the rainwater that's coming down and reutilize that in better, more self-driving ways. This is really the demonstration sites for the world, so they can really see how abundance is here now. It's attainable, and it's there for all of us to experience joyfully.
So I look at this and get very excited because we have ground. And if
do.
we build one of these as the center and then becomes the classroom, the teaching arena, for others to be able to duplicate this, and it's really unlimited in potential. And then from one, who knows what that turns into, but I mean, this is really tremendous.
Yeah.
And we can do it in a format that enables our American heroes, our men and women, to utilize the money they've already earned towards education, give them a genuine and real education, and then give them an opportunity to thrive in life. So it really combines so many of the aspects that we're all about already. I absolutely love it.
Awesome. Man, this is how it's been working. The synchronicities and the cooperative incidences are just every day, all day long lately.
Well, and Matt, we'll make sure to get you the full presentation information on all this, so we can help you, really understand it, and at the same time be able to help move it forward within your organization. And any of our listeners that are interested in the Freedom Farm Academy, please reach out to us. You can reach out to me directly, Matthew at foodforestabundance.com, and happy to get you more information about all of this.
And Matt, where can we reach you, and who would you like to reach during this show right now? Who would you like to reach out to and invite to your place?
Everybody can look at us on the web, Camp Freedom PA, as in Pennsylvania, campfreedompa.org. and you can look at everything that we've done, watch some incredible testimonials of true heroes that where their lives have literally been rescued and saved. You can see all the things that we're involved in. Again, everything we do is free of charge to our veterans and first responders. Nobody pays a penny to participate in any of the activities and adventures that we have going on. And so that all comes through the generous volunteer support. Last year, we had 7,200 hours of volunteer hours logged on our property. Last year, we saw 2,100 disabled vets, first responders, or family members, and Gold Star families on our ground that we served. Of course, there's material goods. We need help in material support. So there might be somebody who owns a company or that just has a burden that says, hey, I'm attached to this or that. And we can provide material items for Camp Freedom. I'll give you an example. A few years ago, our friends at Pocono Raceway said, hey, we may not be able to provide finances, but we have a connection with this paper company, and we're going to provide all of your paper goods for a year. That was an incredibly massive burden taken away from Camp Freedom in expenses. That was awesome. So things like that, material donations, and of course, financial donations. One of the things I'm most proud of is, 2,300 acres. We run that all with 7 employees. It's insane. We should have about 30. But because our volunteer base is so large and active, we're able to be very lean and mean. And last year, we raised $1.1 million of a $1.6 million budget. So guess what we did? We were fiscally responsible and operated on $1.1 million. We didn't go in debt to run anything. And here's the awesome part. Only 5.3% was administrative. We are lean and we are mean, and you don't see that in the nonprofit space very often, and we're very proud of that. And we take financial contributions incredibly seriously because there's so many that take advantage of in the nonprofit space, unfortunately, of these scenarios, and we're not one of them. So you can know your money is being taken care of and managed correctly. You can know that your resources are being managed and taken care of correctly, and you can know that if you're in the area and you want to volunteer, that you'll be contributing and become a part of the process of seeing lives literally saved through outdoor adventures.
And as you begin growing food on the property, you're going to be even recapturing more of those donation dollars into helping in a variety of ways, right? The better food we know helps people heal in a better way, plus all the additional benefits that are there. So that's phenomenal. How many veterans in the U.S. are disabled? Like, what's that number? Do you have any idea?
There's 4 million veterans in the VA system itself. So there's just over 4 million veterans in the VA system. And, there's a ton of veterans who are anti-VA, who are not in that system. So what that number really is, I don't know, but we know it's a massive number. And it's one that requires an immense amount of care. And we really do this much. But we recognize that. We do what we do well, but we recognize we're just one component. And so one of the things we do is we encourage other nonprofits to come on the grounds of Camp Freedom and do what they do best. We've been blessed with this ground, and we're a rarity out there. People don't have ground like that. So we encourage other nonprofits, carry out your mission here. Come here. We'll let you utilize it and use it and capitalize on how we've been blessed so that you can help others, because we recognize we don't have all the answers. We just have some of them.
So that's VA. And then on top of that, you have the first responders. So, wow.
And what's heartbreaking about that is, the first responder, the VA system, the veteran system was kind of easy to break into, because if a veteran is in the VA system, they've already been categorized. They've already gone through the process. Hey, you are a veteran who's disabled at X percentage rate, and that's all clear. So it's very easy to have those discussions. If you're a law enforcement officer and you say, I'm struggling with PTSI, if you say you're struggling in that area, oftentimes you lose your job.
Yeah.
Because our culture has stigmas built around mental health that are false, that are very wrong, And so, you come out and say, hey, I'm struggling from past trauma, and you're fired. And so many have been hesitant to speak of the realities of their struggle and battle. And it's getting better. But we had to navigate differently in the first responder space and say, look, you just need to come to Camp Freedom for a getaway. That's all. Just come and spend some time here and We don't label anybody. We're not medical, so we don't diagnose anybody. We don't do anything. You just come and find a great outdoor adventure and find some healing. And that was protecting these great men and women who are serving in the first responder side and not jeopardizing their livelihood.
So a lot of them are suffering in silence.
Great terminology.
Wow.
100%. 100%.
Wow. So if any of our listeners here today know someone who's suffering in silence, please reach out to Matt, because they've got some solutions for those people, so they don't have to necessarily reveal anything about what's going on to their organization, but can deal with this with a group of people who understand and can be completely compassionate.
Yeah, we were 100% intentional about not having anything medical on the grounds because of not wanting to fall under the restrictions of HIPAA. It was an intentional move. Great move on our part to not get into that realm. And if we get something that's beyond our care, we have great partners who are in that space that we can resource, that we can use as resources to let people go to different places. But I'm so glad that we made that decision, because it enables us to not have to be confined in our non-traditional approach to healing. And it's great.
Love it.
So right now, Matt, based on all of your experience working with these people, what can you tell us as some of the best ways for immediate steps that people who are listening here today who may be struggling with any of these things, as far as their own mental health goes, what are some of the best things that you've learned that they can implement?
Yeah, it's the first step of, we got to recognize that trauma is real and it has an effect on our mental, our physical, our spiritual areas of our life. It has an effect on all of us. And I think so many programs start with the concept of kind of downplaying or lessening the reality of the effects of trauma on our lives. It's real. And you can't say you're going to help people who've experienced trauma because you don't like how they deal with trauma. Kind of erases the ability to impact people's lives. So the first thing is, we start with a recognition that for those of you who are listening and suffering in silence or not in silence, those of you who are suffering from trauma, we recognize that your trauma is real and it's genuine and it's impacted you in a very specific way. And you are created uniquely, and how it's impacted you will be different from how it impacts others. And we recognize that, acknowledge that, and respect that. The pattern that we've watched across the board, it looks slightly different in everybody's life, is really, really strong. And we see it all the time. We see isolation as the enemy number one, often accompanied by drugs and or alcohol, often starting with prescription. And it leads to desperation. So isolation, drugs and or alcohol leading to desperation. And that takes shape many different ways, but here's where it does. It ends in destructive ways all the time. It ends in just people being robbed of the life that they can have. Sometimes because of their own choices, sometimes because of choices of others, and sometimes because of circumstances that were completely outside of their control. However, isolation, drugs, and or alcohol will always lead to desperation. And that is where the mental side of what we deal with often takes shape. And isolation being the greatest enemy. So how do you help yourself? The first thing is fight that impulse to isolate. Isolation will never end well. It is always going to take you further than you thought it could. And it's always going to take you to a deeper place of darkness than you ever imagined you could go. So break the chain by forcing yourself out of isolation. And that comes in many shapes and forms, today, you talk to anybody under 35 and they think that they have 1,000 friends because they have 1,000 friends on Facebook. You know what I mean? That's not genuine friendship. And I'm not saying you can't build some things and some relationships through social media. We utilize it. I get that. However, if you're isolated always, and all you do all day long is stay isolated, you're going to find yourself in some bad places. So the first advice is break the isolation. And that takes an intentional and purposeful effort on your part to break that. So when that friend reaches out and says, hey, do you want to go do this today? Go do it even if you don't feel like it. Get out of the house, get out of the video game, get out of the social media, get outside. is my second piece of advice. Break the isolation and break it outdoors. And then find one or two trusted friends. You don't need 30, you don't need 40, you don't need 50, but find one or two people you trust, who you trust that they love you and care for you, and get engaged relationally, because at the end of the day, I believe it's the relationships that give you that sustainability to stay off of that train wreck course that you may be on right now. And I don't say that in a way of condemnation. I say that in a way of there is hope, no matter how far you are down the tracks. And that hope comes through breaking the isolation.
Wow, that's really some
awesome.
Incredible pieces of knowledge there, Matt. And it immediately brings me to thinking about these past 2.5 years, really, of this, we'll call it a pandemic with a plan in there. Because one of the core things that was said to everybody is stay home, right? Stay home, but we're all in this together. So stay home. And that created a scenario where everybody pretty much was put into isolation. Regardless if you had trauma going on or whatever in your life, you were kept apart from other people. Now, you had your family around if you had a family, but for the most part, we were very cut off from our social circles, and fear was implanted and perpetuated, right? The propaganda became nonstop. It was propaganda on social media. It was propaganda on the radio, on the television, and name your place that you could consume at home, right? To continually help you feel that much more isolated and afraid. And then it's also proven that social media does make you more likely to be depressed, right? It's opposite. We call it social. It ain't social. It is the opposite of that. You're doing it by yourself, to the point now where we see people go out for dinner with their friends and they're not even talking to one another. They're isolated, looking at their phones, feeling connected to their friends on social media, but looking for the next like, that dopamine hit, right? The dopamine hit of I made a post earlier today and so liked it. Dopamine hit. Someone else, but then they don't get enough. There's not enough people liking it. So now they don't feel good and they're isolated again, right? So sorry to go off on a little bit of a tangent there, but it just made me immediately think about how over this past 2.5 years, how it's been employed to do the same thing to everybody. And when I think about Canada, I'm not sure 100% about the US. I think it's the same, but they closed gyms, kept open liquor stores.
You're tapping into so much there. It's so rich, because the reality is this. You look at any segment of our society in the last 3 years, any segment, you look at children, you look at children in public education, children in private education, children in charter schools. Then you look at law enforcement. Then you look at first responders. Then you look at doctors and nurses. Then you look at construction workers. Then you look at veterans. Then you look at first responders, regardless or irregardless of any trauma they've ever faced in life. And all of the numbers, all of the metrics, suicide through the roof in every area of life. You look at the metrics of domestic violence through the roof in every area of life. You look at rape through the roof in every area of life. I mean, I hate to talk about these horrible things, but it's reality.
It's reality.
You look at all the metrics that are a result of forced isolation, and everything, the wheels came off of everything, because we are relational beings created to be in relationships. And even when we start talking get off the grid, people may think that means to isolate. You're talking about taking care of groups of people, taking care of others in your network, in your sphere of influence. Exactly.
It's a Freedom Farm Academy where we talk to each other, where we work with our neighbors together. That's the only way we're going to win this war, is together. Our enemy is the corporation, right? Where we're being forced to do things and coerced into doing other things because we just don't know that there's a better way. So our thing is about the exact opposite of that, is let's get out there and talk to your neighbors and serve them, help them grow food, help them be happy, help them be self-reliant, and get off of the cancerous drugs and the diabetic foods and all this crazy shit. And it's the most relevant and an awesome business model that I can imagine in the world right now, is helping people love themselves and then creating the foundation so they can serve themselves and others.
I look at living in this city in apartments and condominiums, right? So you're in these massive structures that have more people in them than ever before, right? Hundreds, thousands, even in some of them. And those people who live in those condos and apartment buildings, they don't even talk to their neighbors. They don't even know their neighbors. They might see them in the elevator every now and again, but they're more isolated than ever living in the cities like that. And then I think for myself, so I've lived in the cities in the big, the nice condos and that kind of stuff. And then I moved out to a suburb where I had a bit of a yard and a neighborhood, and I started meeting some people in my neighborhood. And then I moved even further out of the city, and my neighbors had more space, but they were more friendly, welcoming, brought us stuff when we moved in, intentionally came to visit and say hi, helped out when a storm hit, brought over their generators and made sure we were okay. And now I've moved even farther. And my wife said to me the other day, I can't believe how nice everybody is around here. How many more people care about you in the country? And it's such an interesting dichotomy here, because we're around way less people, but the care level is through the roof. And then we go to the city where we're around everybody and no one gives a shit. No one wants to talk to you. Nobody smiles, nobody, nothing. Right?
You've got my mind going crazy right now on what you just said, Matt, based on a concept of isolated in plain view, isolated in plain sight. And I don't know where it's going to go, whether it's going to turn into a sermon or a book or what it's going to do. But it's been the thought in my mind for the last 3 years is we are isolated when we're together. You were talking about sitting at dinner. And everybody's on their phone. Nobody's talking to each other. Everybody's checking everything, and you also talked about the concept of getting that like and what it does to you, and getting another like and getting another like. But it's just, I equate it to sin. What you did yesterday doesn't become enough anymore. And so you got to heighten it a little bit. You got to heighten it a little bit. You got to get a little more. You got to get a little more. It's drug addiction. You got to get a little more. You got to get a little more. And that's that's the great lie. Of isolated in plain sight or in plain view. And that's a great thought, Matt. Great thought.
Yeah. Dude, there's a book called Ready Player One and Ready Player Two, and Spielberg made the movie. But the book, it's fascinating if you like reading futuristic stuff. Like I've spent so much time reading personal development and business books and all kinds of stuff like that every now and again I'll pick up a book that's more fiction. But this book is almost like a reality tale. Everybody in these stories, it's in the future, but they live in, it's basically old campers that have now been stacked on one another. So they're living in shit boxes. Life sucks on the outside, but inside the metaverse, right, which we know is coming, inside the metaverse, you can be whoever you want. And it's just this amazing place that all these extremely unhealthy, unhappy, miserable people go to get all their good feels. And we're headed this direction, right? Unless people wake up and start to realize that the most important thing for us right now is actual human connection and collaboration and community and caring for one another, we are headed down a very slippery slope fast.
And we know it. And we've accepted it. Not only do we know it, we've accepted it, but there's this contingent now. And you see it rising up. You see people getting sick and fed up with the lies, with the deceit and with, and again, I don't know how that's going to take shape, but I know that people have got to stand up for what's best for them and for their families. And people are starting to do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In droves. In droves. The media wants us to believe we're the fringe minority. I have a funny feeling we are the fringe majority and we're not the fringe. I have a feeling there's a lot more of us who internally feel that there is something wrong with the direction that we're headed. And that feeling is the guidance system telling us we got to change course. We need to get back to the way we interact with nature, where we interact and care about others, and how we as a humanity collectively work together to not only care for our planet and nature as a whole, but also each other as a whole, and take advantage of the abundance that nature provides. It's here for all of us. The thing is, the abundance, it's free. The abundance is free, right?
Yeah.
Which, if there's no money in it, some people don't want to participate in it. But the freedom part, the abundance, it's there for free. And that's the most beautiful thing about all of this.
Yeah.
The best things in life are free. Isn't that what they say?
Absolutely. And you nailed it. Oh man, you guys, this is an awesome conversation. There's so many components and elements that we're putting together right now. And Matt Guedes, thank you. Like, incredible, heartfelt thank you for what you do. And now how we design a collaboration is going to impact so many people's lives. I'm very excited about this.
Let's get in a car or on a plane, guys, and get you up to Pennsylvania so you can see this ground. Let's make it happen.
So cool.
Love it. Yes.
Do it.
Yeah, we'll keep it. Well, I'll send you an email right after this. We'll get the design elements. Matthew will send you the Freedom Farm Academy details. We've got funders, because this is one of the best investments any investor can ever make. It's investing in freedom in a way that's a very profitable business model, and everybody wins. The only entities that don't win are the ones that we want to lose.
Great. That's a good statement.
And yeah, we'll throw it out there to our audience again. If you or you know someone who really is into helping with this transition and creating the freedom that we all know we deserve and that's available for us today, please reach out to us. And if you know someone who's suffering in silence, is a first responder, a veteran, and can utilize what Matt and his organization, Camp Freedom, is doing, please reach out to them. We're going to make sure all the information to contact them is in the show notes. We want to be here for you in the best way we can. We want to serve others, both Food Forest Abundance and Camp Freedom and the Freedom Farm Academy. We are here to serve. So if we can serve, let us know.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you too, brother. Matt. This has been an incredible conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the show today with us. We're sorry that we had a little technical difficulty last time, but I think it all works out properly in the end. Our conversation, I feel, is better. We had a great one last time, but now we're more succinct and clear. I think we're delivering better information overall, and we really are giving now your organization the proper platform and recognition that it deserves.
Thank you again, guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Make sure to tune in again to the Jim Gale Show. Like us, subscribe, share, and make sure to turn on your notifications so you're always up to date.
Thank you for tuning into the show. You can check out more episodes on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and your favorite podcast apps. Check out our show notes for any websites linked to this episode, including where to connect with us on social media.
We appreciate you dropping by today. Remember to like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications so you'll be updated with each episode.
And visit us at thejimgaleshow.com to check out all of our exclusive content. We appreciate you dropping by.